Okay, that's a very cool picture you have there.
Oh, you like that?
Yeah, that's very nice.
That's
Some great fire
that's kind of
management.
part of this.
Yeah,
It's hard to, say this is this and this is that because it's all kind of gone together, and it's really fun to be here and share, that journey that continues.
exactly. And I feel like it's really ramping up. It just feels that way. Um, there's more and more people kind of I hate to use the word awaken, but it's this kind of feeling that more and more people are coming online here. So let me go ahead and introduce you. I just very quickly, Peter has welcome to everyone who's here, and thank you for spending this time with us this evening. My name is Judy Kitt. I'm the president of the Foundation for Mind Being Research, and we're very happy to welcome Peter May to speak with us this evening. Peter, he has this amazing bio that you should read on his website, which is windhorsealchemy.com. But I'm going to just tell you a little bit about him. He grew up in a suburb of Detroit and Detroit, Michigan, and he went to University of Michigan and got a bachelor's degree in architecture with independent studies in landscape architecture. So always been connected to the land. He lives in Crestone, Colorado, following his interests in mountaineering and spiritual diversity. Partnering with nature, he handcrafts all the alchemies for Windhorse Botanicals, which he'll talk about. Peter is also the lead in a nature fusion band called the Sonic Apothecary, which is composed of human and plant musicians, which is awesome. The band offers healing journey concerts around the country. He's a lifelong athlete, an organic musician, a sustainable activist, and a multi-realmed alchemist who partners with nature to support healing, balance, and peace. So, Peter, we're so excited to have you here, and you're fresh from your presentation at the New Living Expo in Marin last week. Peter talked on a panel on regeneration, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so welcome.
Thank you, Judy. It's great to be here and share, and I've been enjoying the talk before me, about the wind and the air,
Mm-hmm.
and I got to listen to that one, and it really inspired me to want to share and then incorporate also and integrate what she brought, in terms of her experience and what she's offering.
I love it. I had someone come on to talk about the intelligence of water, and then Renee talked about the intelligence of air, and you're talking about the intelligence of fire. I love it so much. I love that as humanity is hopefully kind of raising its vibration, we're coming to a point where we can again consciously choose to partner with nature, to be aware of our connection and our partnership so that we can create some miracles. That's what I think is happening.
Yes, I think it's happening. I think it's happening. Definitely, we kind of sometimes refer to it as the space of miracles. How do we set that up? That's something we do in our journeys, that we'll get to. About how do we know we don't create the miracles, but we can certainly set them up and be aligned so they're more often can come. I think I've just had at least a couple in the last couple days. And sometimes they're really small and sometimes they're big. So we can hit on that. I mean, this is all like fresh because each day is this connection with for me myself personally is with all of the elements.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I start. I'd like to start with all of the elements. I'm wearing my alchemy shirt. The alchemy, the elements are here, and from the traditional alchemy sense of earth, water, fire, air, and space, though space and ether might be interchangeable.
I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take it where you want to take it.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, it's really fun to be here, and I was just on the panel at the New Living Expo about Regenesis, and my friend Michael DiMartino put it together, and it was amazing because we had people talking about banking and how that can be regenerated, and bioremediation in nature, and then the water situation in California and how that's so important, as is the politics of water, not just in California, but the West and in Colorado as well. And then we had people talking about, one man talking about the masculine divine qualities and how to bring that forward. And then we had, I talked about the wisdom fire, and I think people got a sense of that it's important to now integrate what we're doing. And it's not just one thing. I know it's can be so complex. As I look around, my laboratory, in a sense, there's all kinds of things in it. It's not just pure alchemy, or it's not just pure fire. It's not just music. And one of my teachers once said to me that the elements are always present. No matter where you go, the elements are always present. And so when I teach in my workshops and things, I challenge people, if they'd like the challenge, to find the elements, let's say, in the wind or in water, in something we think of as pure, but we just take wind, for instance. Yes, there's dust. Yes, there's a relative humidity. Yes, there's fire. Otherwise, it would be frozen, like 0 Kelvin. And it's all there. And then, of course, space. And space is one of those things where it's like, what do you mean by space? No one really knows. And so we often look to the Dzogchen traditions of Tibetan Buddhism to bring us into that awareness of space. But more on that later, because I want to kind of jump in as I introduce myself at the expo as a firefighter. And so I've been a firefighter since 1993. And I was the fire chief of a small department where I live, and then created another fire department as well. And I live in a place that is prone to wildfire. And in this particular place had historic fires, and it also had fires that were used intentionally by the Ute and Apaches in a stewardship role. And my tree out here, it's a mother tree. It's 300 years old. And it has several fire scars on it. And so you mentioned I went to the University of Michigan, and part of my additional studies besides architecture was landscape architecture. And one of my professors, he did projects with a group of First Nation people, and they're from the island called Walpole Island, just across the St. Clair River in Ontario, and it's Chippewa or Ojibwe, and then Ottawa and Potawatomi. It's called the Council of Three Fires. And for hundreds and hundreds of years, they've been burning their place. And because they burn in the right way, and this is where I was introduced to wisdom fire, though they never called it that. They have every endangered species of southern Michigan and Ontario in abundance, plant and animal. And there's a number of things that we'll go into with the wisdom fire. What it is, at least from my sense, how it's been used traditionally, and then how we can use it again. But going back to being a firefighter, traditionally, a firefighter puts the wet stuff on the red stuff. I think we may have heard that, but we can understand, if it's burning, put water on it and call it good. And hopefully that's enough. And that's certainly one way. And if you do that, you're going to become a pretty good firefighter. If you want to apply what you learn in firefighting, there's another way to do it as well, and that's called balancing the elements. And so instead of putting the wet stuff on the red stuff, you balance the fire that is existing with the other elements. In this sense, we would balance them with water and or earth. And if we could, we would take away the oxygen or the wind element. Space is pretty much the base here, and we operate it within the space. And so if you do it from that method, you are then able to take what you learn very easily in firefighting, only in this sense you are balancing the elements, and now apply it to so many other aspects in your life, including your own personal elemental balance. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense to me. I hope it makes sense to people listening, but it not only makes sense, but it I'm trying to think of what the words are. It feels so right. Right. It doesn't just make sense. It's like, yes, this is the way things are when they're in balance. Right.
Right. And I want to show my picture just for a moment
Okay.
because it is my screensaver. And we just take a moment to look at it. There's a lot going on in this picture, which I'll get to. And if you see here, that's me playing the didgeridoo, and there's a fire there. And the fire, I'm playing to the fire. And what you don't see is, I don't think we actually, we can't see all of it, but I was playing to it, and then we saw images in the fire after, as I was playing. And I want to point out, you might be able to see that ball of purple blue light. Do you see that?
Close to the fire. Oh, yes, right in the middle. Right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that I've had some experiences with fire, and it's almost like it is talking to me, both maybe as fire, but also as a medium for other things to come through. Does that make sense?
You know, it makes total sense. One of the things that I loved when we spoke before is when you said, when you were teaching people how to fight fires out on the lands, and you told these guys who were not necessarily, spiritual, or just going to go out there and fight the fire, the first thing you're going to do is say hello. Right? You're going to say hello to the spirit of the fire. And I thought that just changes everything, right? That communication, that willingness to say, we're in a dance here, seems so important.
And I just noticed some of the chat comments that some people could not see that image. So is there any way, we'll show it again.
Okay.
Maybe after and I'm going to describe it, okay? Because it's kind of important. And this is, I think, where the idea, at least, of wisdom fire comes from. And I'm playing the didgeridoo. I'm using the fire like a mirror. And I may have been doing a prayer. And I was doing a prayer. I want people guessing. We don't have any more time for that. I'd love to let you find it on your own, but I want to just be kind of straight up. I was doing a prayer. And the prayer was, may perfection abound. May everyone be safe here. We were hosting a group from Japan. And that image is the image, there were numerous images. And then one of the images was almost like there was something like a protector coming out of the flame. Okay. And then the fire died down over time. We let it go out, or at least go down. And then someone took a picture, because the big thing that the Japanese participants like to do is have s'mores, because they don't get to do that. They don't get to have fires like this. And so we're eating s'mores, and someone shot a photo. And if you're familiar with the occurrence called an orb or a tigle,
mm-hmm.
They were all over the place. They were like marshmallows in the space as they were eating marshmallows. I think, and to me, the field had been built so well that each one of us was invited to touch that wisdom aspect of ourselves. And I believe we were looking at our own fields, depending on your perspective, of course. And perhaps there were other beings there that were coming from that state of perfection, that divine sense.
Tell me again what your prayer was.
It was may all beings be protected, and may all beings be safe.
And you had a sense that what emerged from the fire was this sense of a protector,
right?
A protective energy.
Right, a protective energy, exactly. almost like I'm going to see myself for what I'm going to say next because it's kind of fun. It's a protective plasma,
Hmm.
a plasmic body. Plasmas are energy and liquid and gas, let's say. At least the textbook answer. I like to think of plasmas as not only that, but also color and consciousness, if not many other things within that. There certainly could be energy, meaning an electric field, a magnetic field, an electromagnetic field, so many things. And that's, I think, how maybe traditionally people related with maybe perhaps deities, that they could appear, they could become manifest, they could embody us. Um, in that sense, this is going way back, and I do study in a tradition that's over 18,000 years old, and that's the one that brings up the idea of Dzogchen. Dzogchen being the great perfection, that our primary focus is on the space in which all exists. And once you're there, I think it takes a bit. It's not like it's automatic. But once we can get there, all of the other elements then are within that space. And so one of the best parts about fire, which we'll do toward the end, is I want to invite everyone to focus on the fire. We're going to do some fire gazing at the end. And as you said, when we were in Washington and our fire line was going to be pushed by the fire. And we knew this. And so someone who was brand new to it said, "What do you want us to do when the fire hits our line?" And this is a bulldozed fire line. This is, bare dirt. This is where trees were taken down. So you had a fire break. And I said to him, "I want you to say hello to the fire." And he says, "You got it." He knew I wasn't kidding, because I don't kid out there, especially in that kind of circumstance. My main objective was that everyone would be safe. He has a family, and I just want him to go home to his family. So the fire comes. It's pushing. It's running up against this. We are behind the bulldozers as a shield. We're not taking out our fire shelters because that's not that intense at that point. And basically, everyone was safe. But it does take an openness to engage in that way. And one maybe part of the story I didn't tell you is that I had gone down that mountain to see where the fire was, because that's my job as the commander, is to know where it is. And you always want to mark your way, because the woods, when you look around, you have no idea where to go. And there was so much downed and dead material, it wasn't obvious. And so all of a sudden there's the fire, and I see it on, and the wind comes up, and it's running up at me. And there was a point there I was like, oh wow, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it back. And so that didn't happen. I'm here. I didn't have to do any additional practices, such as, okay, I'm the fire too. Fire doesn't burn itself. Some people know this as the Kundalini. And in the tradition I study, and it's called Tumo, the inner fire, and how to cultivate that. And that's not even something I was even thinking of doing. And that would have had to have been its own miracle. But that's not what happened. I was able to get up. I saw where I had put my flagging so I could get back safely, though I was moving at a good clip. But it's steep. It's got all your fire equipment. But I said, "Oh, there you are, fire. Hello." And the reason we do this is so that we can have a relationship directly with the fire, like we're having a talk now. It doesn't speak English, but it does. Once you get to know the fire, it'll inform you what it's going to do when you pay attention. Mm. It can become one of your best allies. It can say hello back. Just like the wind can, just like the water can. These are the dynamic elements. And the best thing about fire in terms of getting to know space is that you can see the space in the fire, whereas the other elements, the wind, you can feel the wind, but you can't see it. The water, that's a good one too, though it's a little bit more difficult. Earth, it's really hard to see the space. And ideally, can you see the space directly in the space? It's so funny to say it that way, and people have questions. We'll get into that. And instead of space, you might say openness. Can I connect with the openness?
When you also told a story of a fire that told you why it was burning so hot, so so fiercely. Do you remember that, when it said something like, oh,
I remember.
Yeah,
And that's not just one fire,
I'm sure.
Because as you get into this, as you can see, and hopefully people understand this, is that I'm coming from a science perspective as much as I can, but I also am sensitive. And I'm going to tell you the story because this way people will get a feel for this. So I'm about 4 or 5 years old, and I'm at the Toronto World's Fair, and it's there in Canada, and so we drove to it. We're there in the Spanish Pavilion, and we go in, and I'm not very tall, I'm 4 or 5 years old, and I get into that building. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to get out of here. This is not feeling good. And everyone goes, oh, we'll lift you up to see, there are all these relics there and all these cases. And so I'm going, no, I have to get out of here. And so, being capable, I start making a fit because I wanted to keep my family safe. So I made a fit, made them leave. Okay, so we come home, we did something else there, who knows what. 2 months later, my mom hears on the radio that place had burned down. And so inside me, I correlated that feeling and fire. Jump ahead 20 years, let's say, or 25 years. I'm at Mesa Verde National Park. And of all things, I'm getting trained as a firefighter sawyer, someone who operates a chainsaw. And this is just when the parks are starting to allow this to happen, because usually a national park is, whatever it is, just preserve it. It's like a museum. And nature doesn't really work that way. So we're doing some of the work. And so we do a lot of work for them. And they said, oh, why don't you go see the kivas and the cliff dwellings? And I come around that corner and I look in there and like, oh my gosh, here's this feeling again. This feeling of foreboding. And I go, oh my gosh. And so I didn't run away. I didn't make everybody leave. But my friend and I, who had traveled there together, he was looking at our campsite. There was a fire ring and there was a branch kind of overhanging the fire pit. He goes, oh, look, if we don't, remove that, this could burn, catch fire. And I thought to myself, yeah, but that's not really the reason. And I knew inside what was going to happen. And that summer, like 50 to 80% of the park burned because I could feel that energy. And we'll now be plain. Okay, and this is obviously my perspective, is that the spirits there had not been fed. And from another tradition, they eat smoke. And if they don't get smoke, the smoke comes somehow. However that happens, I don't know. Maybe it's lightning, maybe people light it, on accident or on purpose. So I knew that it was going to burn, and it did. It burned again, I think, in the next few years. So I get to this fire in Washington, and a lot of Washington is burning that summer. And I'm looking around the fire, and I'm going, okay, I know you're here. I can sense you. We're talking about the spirits. And I said to him, you have 50,000 acres of smoke. Why do you need more? And they answer. They go, you didn't give it to us. I said, oh, is that what this is about? And then kind of like when you catch a little kid and you nail it. They didn't answer, and I went, okay. And so over the next few days, I made sure that they got what they needed. And then miraculously, within a few days, it started to rain. Who knows? Who knows what really happened there? But there is this opportunity for relationship. And that's the biggest thing of not just with fire on the outside, but in this sense, the spirits and the fire. And that's kind of one particular perspective that I'm writing a book, and it's on its way. It's called Walking the Spirit Line, the parallels of wildland firefighting and holistic spiritual practice. And the other perspective is acknowledging the fire on the outside and also acknowledging your fire on the inside and letting them interact. And, there is a good way to do this. And I may start offering this, especially in relationship to other kinds of elemental immersions and retreats that I do already. And that's a fire walk. And to go back to the book, because it pertains to this, the book is about, there's 3 ways to fight fire. The first one is to go direct. And so you have 1 foot in the unburned and 1 foot in the burning material. And it's the safest way because you know right where the fire is. If something goes wrong or the fire gets really big, you can go into the black where it's already burned, provided it's not so hot. That's called going direct. The next method is called going indirect. And that's where you're off of it maybe 10 feet because it's burning too hot, or you're off of it 60 feet or maybe even a mile. And then you make a fire line and then you burn back. You burn it out. That's called going indirect. And then the third way is called using your escape route to go into your safety zone, meaning you're retreating. You're running away. And because it's way too intense, you can't even go indirect. And so in spiritual practice, there are 3 methods primarily. There's more, but 3 primary ones. And the first one is called Dzogchen, the Great Perfection. Can you go direct with life while you're connected with openness and awareness? Sometimes we can, and sometimes we can't. Usually when it's all good, we can. When it's all bad, no, we can't. But if you can, that is amazing. Can you, feel super frustrated or angry and still be connected with openness and awareness when it didn't go your way, or when your truck breaks down, or whatever it is? So then you go to the next one, which is called working with energy. It's called Tantra. Now you're working with the energy. And that's where you're not as directly affected. And so you might use different practices and sometimes deities, the plasmic bodies, to help you with it. And sometimes that practice can take you right into that great perfection state, the space and light, the openness and awareness. Or it can take you to where you're more escaping and you're putting it on hold for a while. And neither one of these is good or bad. Your awareness of what you're doing is primary here. So that's the second, the tantric approach, working with the energy. The third approach is called sutra. Sutra is akin to more escaping and renouncing things. So if something makes you angry, then don't do it and don't be around it. So then, there are many kinds of sutric practices, such as you're going to go on retreat and live at a retreat center. And so it's all going to be love and light. And that has definitely its advantages and its disadvantages. Some people begin there because you do want a foundation. You want to know where to go to be safe, number one, whether it's in life or if you're a firefighter out in the woods, in the mountains. And then when you can, maybe bump it up to the energetic practice. It's true of life too. And then when you get really good, come up to the Dzogchen practice. And that allows you to go freely in between, direct, indirect, or in a sense, run away. There are other practices known as shamanism and causal vehicle that kind of can fit into all of these. But the main thing is that you know what you're connected with, you know what's appropriate for you to do. That's what the book's about. That's how it was, as I've both done both the spiritual practices and the firefighting. And so if you want to, back to the fire walking now, right? I was in an alchemy conference, and um, someone needed help lighting the fire for the fire walk, and it's Georgia. Like, oh man, it's all wet here. How are you going to get this to burn? And so he had set up all these little fires, trying to get at least a little of them to burn and bring it together. He's like, no, fire likes a house that looks like fire. So let's build its house. I said, what do you have for like fuel? He goes, well, I got this wood, but it's kind of wet. And then I think he said he had kerosene. I said, oh, we have kerosene. It's gonna light pretty fast. So we light it, and it's the first time I got to light a fire and then walk on it as well. And so we got it going. And back in Georgia and the eastern part of this country, fire won't burn until it's below 75% relative humidity. Still pretty wet, and it'll burn. Whereas where I live in Colorado, it has to be below 35%, otherwise it won't burn. It's very interesting. It's based on what it's used to. And so we get the fire going, and I cannot wait. And the main facilitator, he knew I could not wait. And he goes, let the other people go first. I said, I'm fine. I can just hold it. I'm super excited because I hadn't done one in a little bit. And so I'm going to do the very first one, the first walk, as I was taught. Kind of like, put your attention on the other side of the fire. Know that you can do it. And maybe if you need any help, it's cool green moss that you kind of whisper. And so I go across that way, and I can feel it's hot, but I'm not burned. It's fine. And so then I come back around, and this time I'm going to do it, but more on a tantric, more of a mantra practice, where I'm going to connect with that divine plasma. So I do it again, and this time it's much cooler. And so I do it again, and this time I'm going to go for the direct experience of connecting with the openness and awareness, otherwise known as space and light. Just so we're clear, because that's my training in this particular tradition. And so I do it, and it's not even hot at all. And so I did it a number of other times, including with a 7-year-old named Neroli. And that was years ago. I wonder how that's affected her, because she did just fine. And we talk about our being, and our being, I like to say, is certainly includes our bodies, physical bodies in space. In just look at outer space, at the stars, and it's that space, but it's here, space. But then we have an energy body, or an energy flow. Sometimes traditionally they call that light. I'll go with energy. And then we have a field. And that picture, I'm going to put it on again, and I'll have to describe it for everybody. But that field, it's like that field is coming out of the didgeridoo. It's made a field.
Now, can people see this now? Or is this, so Peter's sharing his screen with a photo right in the middle of it. Let me know if you can see that. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't, it on YouTube, it doesn't show.
Okay, can they see my photo? Or my picture? Can they see me? Oh, you see? Oh, that's really funny. I'm sorry you can't see it.
Yeah.
Maybe we can make a way for them to see it. I can put it on my website. They can go to the website then.
Yeah, and if you send it to me, I'll put it out in the newsletter as well, so you can see what he's talking about.
Yeah, and we can share that, especially since you know the story behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's similar to as I'm walking on the fire. I know it's not me. It's the greater me, which isn't me, but it is. It's that, the things we have heard in other words. So that kind of tipped me off to a number of things. And that consciousness and fire can interact, at least. Fire is a dynamic element. I think that's also true of the wind and of water. I think that's what we're seeing, with Emoto. I got to meet Dr. Emoto. The name of my business is Windhorse Botanicals and Windhorse Alchemy. The wind is the life force. It is the wind. And that's how you deal with the life forces. Even if it looks like it's fire or earth, it's still a life force, just in different densities. So um, about this time, it's like 2006. I'm not sure you'll be able to see this, but we started to lower the fire danger where I live, and that meant reducing um, the smaller trees and branches. And then we didn't have a use for it, but then David Crow came to our place, and he has Fluorocopia, and together we utilized the chips to become essential oil, and that's what I'm holding here. It's pinyon pine, and the pinyon pine essential oil. No one was even doing this then, but we didn't want to waste the material, so we sent it off to France to see what was in it. And what's in it is um, monoterpenes and sesquiterpenes, and those feed the brain. They feed the pineal, and that it's very much like frankincense and myrrh. And so the interesting thing about essential oil is that in alchemy, the oil is part water and part fire of the plant. The ash is the earth part, and then the air part is the what's called the it's water and then the air component mixed together, and that's the alcohol. So we have the different elements within, and in alchemy, you're separating and then recombining. And they refer to it because they had to hide it as the mercury and the sulfur and the salt. And the mercury is the air and the water, the alcohol, and then the sulfur is the fire and water, and then the salt is the earth. So it's coated. It's all over my shirt.
You're talking about ancient alchemists?
This is ancient alchemy.
Okay.
And one of my good friends, Tom Waters, he's more of he's studied that, and he teaches me. He's a full metal alchemist, and he makes oil of gold. He can extract the essential oil of gold and silver and other metals, of copper. And the oil is the fire. It's a fire component. And so I'm looking back like, oh, look at all these influences I've had. I've had experiences where I start talking to the fire, and it's like it is responding to me. And we would take people out to train them here, and we'd say, okay, you're going to burn a 1 foot diameter circle with, a torch and a tool and some water, and then gradually go up to 2 feet, and then 3, then 5, then 8, 13, up to 34 feet. And that's big. And so we'd all get a chance. Well, some of us did. If you graduated, you could do that. And what you're doing is connecting with your fire and the rest of your elements. And so it will connect with that fire and the rest of the elements, because the wind often plays a role here. And one of my teachers said, don't ever reduce your fire. Bring up all of the other elements, because fire is such a rare, especially the guided fire.
And the reason you're using a Fibonacci sequence in that exercise is to create
just a natural succession of growth.
Okay.
You could use anything, but it was just kind of, we used 1 and then 2 because it's double, but it's very small. You could probably jump, maybe 1 to 5 and then to 13, and then 21's big, and then 34. It's pretty big, pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
But it was more incremental. So we have this relationship with the oil, which is the fire component, that can do something for us, especially when we use it for our lungs. And in many of my products, we do journeys, which is where you put those formulations with a mixture of the essential oil and the trace elements, and it goes on your crown, and that one is pinyon pine and sandalwood, and then one on your third eye, and that's pinyon pine, frankincense, and myrrh with oil of gold. And we like to say it was good enough for Jesus. So hopefully it's good enough for us, right? And the magic of that is that it contains, on this call, I'll get into it because it's probably all over my sweatshirt. In these trees, it's legendary believed and shown to contain rhodium and iridium, very rare minerals. And people say, well, that's not even in the soil. It's like, no, but the tree makes it. That feeds our pineal, and then the gold conducts it through our bodies. So if you know people with different kinds of challenges, especially health-wise, sometimes their brain and their hearts don't communicate because their third eye gets calcified. And so we want to clear that. And that's the way they used to do it. And that's the way you can still do it, especially to promote more of a wellness sense of being and intuition. Numerous, communication devices to get this online. And I'm suggesting everybody do that, especially these days, because we do have pollutants and obstacles in our environment, such as Wi-Fi that we're on now, or aluminum, or like glyphosate, things like that. That are pollutants that can affect us, and these can help us then become purified in a sense. And then we have much more tools to stay healthier and also reveal the other spiritual gifts that we have. So that kept leading, and I have my notes here because at the talk I only had 10 minutes, but here I have, we have a little bit of time. And so the interesting thing was when we distilled this oil, we get a hydrosol. A hydrosol is the water that goes into steam and pushes off the oil. And then in the receiving receiver, you get a layer of the hydrosol and a layer of the oil. And as the pandemic was with us for the last few years, I put together this, and this is a, if you can see that, this is a Q tonic. Maybe I'll take off my blur here for a sec.
Oh, there it is.
And this is a tonic, and this is on my website, and it's made primarily with the pinyon hydrosol, and aspen hydrosol, and mountain oregano hydrosol, and the trace elements, and essential oils of grapefruit and lemon, and schisandra, and star anise, and all these things. And it basically allows us to go into workshops, give it to the 40 to 100 people, and everybody, basically nobody gets sick at our workshops. We've been doing it for the last 2 or 3 years. No matter what you've chosen, it seems to support you, as what was right for you to do. And it's helping people. Some people, like I had long-term COVID. I got it in 2020 at an 11,000 person ski race in Wisconsin, came back, seemed to get over the initial, but then it lasted for months and months and months. And I think it's the trace elements and the shikimic acid that's really helping me kind of break through. And now I feel normal again, meaning I feel like I used to feel. I have my energy back. I do crazy things. I do ski mountaineering races where we actually race up and race down and all that. So the fire is around us, especially when we learn to utilize it. And one thing that came out of this as well, there's the oil and there's the hydrosol, but then there's the chips that we distill. And most of the time you just throw them out as mulch. We noticed that the chips, if they were kept wet in Colorado, this is kind of dry place, would produce mushrooms. And then we noticed that they actually, if you just left them there and planted things in them, it became soil. And so these chips, instead of taking 50 years to break down in a distiller, it took 4 hours and they become soil. And so my whole garden's planted in it. Then what we learned is that the chips, when just left and kept moist, but not wet, produce our own native mycelium. So I started to put it underneath my mother tree. And years ago, I burned underneath her, knowing, we're getting back down to the wisdom fire part, is that if you burn for the trees, which we did here about probably 15 years ago, we burned 400 acres, knowing that fire, the right kind of fire, can help these trees produce nuts. And it was done on the West Coast, it was done on the East Coast. And so we did it, and that next cycle, we had a huge crop. And so over these years, we could not burn as regularly because the climate isn't stable. It's either really too hot and cold or too wet and dry, or wet or dry. And so I developed something that works with the trace elements and what we call effective microorganisms, and I would feed the trees. And so a few years ago, I started doing this, and 2 years later in their cycle, they produce nuts. So this last year, it all came together underneath the 300-year-old mother tree. I put a mound of these chips that were distilled, and they had the mycelium in it. And then I took the trace elements, which is like fire. When fire burns, it leaves a white ash, and the effective microorganisms, and I put it on that mycelium nursery mound, and then gave it to the tree. And what happened was, is that mother tree then, because she's a mother tree, fed all of the other trees, and they all produced nuts, and created this mycelial network all underneath her. It's all this white stringy stuff, which now can absorb moisture right, I believe, right from the air, and keep it when we do receive rain and snow. And thus it lowers fire danger, and then it brings the native species back because it now has nutrients to share. So
That's amazing. That is an amazing story. So, and the chips you refer to, you said this is undergrowth that you're removing from the land.
right, it's the smaller trees that would add to the fire danger.
Mhm.
It's the branches that if fire were to go on the ground, it could, what we call, ladder up into the canopies. And so we take that away. Mainly, the trees are still intact. We just don't have the lower branches, especially around buildings. That's where we usually do it. So I mentioned the burning on Walpole Island. We've been burning here probably since around 2000, the year 2000. And there were two of us that would do these exercises and teach people how to do this. We also burned for recovery of species. And we didn't really know what we were getting into, or that we had been meditators for quite some time. And we're also athletes, so we just naturally go into that zone space when fire's up. We're not really thinking. We're in the zone. We're allowing things to come through. And so we did it a bunch. We noticed certain species coming back. Like, oh, that's interesting. Did we have anything to do with it? And this is we were taught by a man named Dennis Martinez, who's of Odom and other indigenous cultures. We brought him here to Crestone, and he speaks on restoring forests with what's called fire and love. And so my friend Jeffrey goes to Iowa, and then I go to teach them a course, and he burns, and I come back and burn with him. And what comes back are species they hadn't seen in over 100 years. Including one is a Michigan lily. I'm from Michigan, so I always remember that one. And in Iowa, they're restoring the turkey tail, which is 8 to 10 feet tall. And everywhere we burned, it came right back. And so when we did the burning of the pinyon pine trees, we were doing it for them. And so you don't really believe it yourself until you can do it a few times. And so my sister loves monarch butterflies, and they're endangered. And so in Michigan, she has no milkweed on her few acres of grassland, and it's kind of swampy too. So I go back a couple years ago, and I said, okay, what we're going to do, and this is where I'm coining the phrase wisdom fire, and it may have been used before, but it's when we meditate in the best way we can on our true nature, whatever that might be too, right? We can get into that another time. But we're also going to use nature as a mirror, and you stay there as much as you can. Meaning, if thoughts come in, just let them come and let them go. Don't grab them. Don't try to formulate, don't try to review everything and get into this whole mental process. But let them be. Keep your connection with openness and awareness, or space and light, as the fire's burning. So Michigan is one of those harder places to burn. It's wet, it's humid. So we're trying and nothing burns. So we light these bigger fires of other material. It starts burning. We take a lunch break because nothing's working. The fire starts to move. I'm like, oh, it's working now. So we go out, and I tell my brother, because he's right with me, and my sister, stay. It only takes one, but it's easier with a few of us. And we had quite the time. It's your family. You're burning. I mean, you're on the line. I mean, this is real. It's not, you're not playing, but we are. We're playing with the responsibility. So we burn it. And then what comes back a month later is two species of milkweed, and we didn't plant it: common and swamp. And so, with that in mind, I want to kind of give an explanation from Dan Winter. And Dan Winter talks about plasma physics. And what he says is that with your consciousness, we can allow space to become compressed and allow the wave to become a particle. And so if that species is out there and just needs a little bit of compressed space with our consciousness, allowing that light form or light wave to become a particle, a physical particle, perhaps that's one way to do this.
Is this your invitation? Is it your intention? Are you calling in the milkweed, or are you just saying, "Hey, milkweed, we'd love to have some milkweed here"? What are you holding as your intention when you do that?
So to be very specific, I always like to work with, I think what we're calling the openness and awareness, the divine presence, whatever you want to call it, whatever your true nature is. So it's going to be perfect, the perfected perspective. And, we're not always there. So we sometimes need helpers. Like if people work with like enlightened beings or angels or something to that effect. You gather your team to help guide this. And then yes, it is very specific in this sense. In a sense, milkweed, we're inviting you to come back. We're inviting you specifically to come back, like we did with the pinyon pine. Mm-hmm. And then we burn, and then there's a magic to this. And that's during a phase change, as we're burning and our consciousness is the best we can make it as close to perfection as possible, the ash becomes those trace elements and becomes, in a sense, perfect, right for those plants. Does that make sense? Does that answer?
It does. And I am just sort of extrapolating out to, to doing this on a huge scale. If people knew how to do this, I'm just thinking of, you talked on the panel about regeneration, right?
Right. And here we have an alternative to actually live fire. And one of my co-presenters, she shared that her mother had discovered that as monarch butterflies have a special and necessary relationship with milkweed, many other butterflies and moths have that same kind of relationship. They need an exact plant. Mm-hmm. And if we're killing all the weeds and things, we might be killing them off too. And so if we're not doing a stewarding of this, we may want to start, because we like to put it in that nature needs what we call a beneficial rearrangement from time to time. That can be heavy rain. That can be, flooding to a certain degree. If it's huge flooding, that can be actually even an avalanche. But, the more you get, it could be a wildfire. But if it's too hot, there's all degrees of this. The very low intensity burns and the light rains, moderate rains, those are what we call beneficial rearrangement. Scientifically, it's a perturbation. And it gives that, kind of mixes up the bowl a little bit, gives things a chance. Fire exposes the crown of the plants, and then also feeds it the ash, and then fire can trigger. And some plants need that fire. They need it. Otherwise, they go away. Other plants don't like it at all. And so there's a succession.
I love how you use the word stewardship at the beginning and just now, that sense of stewardship, which our modern culture seems to have lost. And you talked about the Council of Three Fires. Is that where you learned this?
I think
for a number of
I met with them, and I would visit them when I would go back to visit my family. And they said to me, "Why are you here?" And I go, "I don't know. I hope it's okay." And they gave me their books. They have books that they printed in Ojibwe to keep their language alive. They have of all the endangered species and threatened species. um, it's important that we regain our role in the landscape, especially where we live. Even if it's what we call wilderness, because if we're living there, it's probably not wilderness. And I live in a place that needs some tending, and we're seeing now that many of us believe that nature can take care of itself, and I believe that. But I also have seen that some of the important keystone species or keystones of nature have been taken away, and one of them is the beaver. And so our nonprofit is actively working to bring that back. It's also working to bring back wisdom fire or cultural fire or its effects. And that, even to do that, you have to somehow connect with yourself. To know that wisdom fire is the effects are pervasive within us. They're permeating us. Just by knowing the idea that we could go out and use fire or even something that's an alternative and allow other species to come back. And I think at the same time, as we heal the environment, we can heal ourselves and bring our elements back into a better balance. And because we've inherited many, many things, patterns, and some are great, some are not. Um, and there are treasures. And I asked my trees if they would produce nuts for me. I would ask them, and with the plant music, we are working on a language with the plants so that it may become more and more and more apparent with the Sonic Apothecary and my friend Tom Wall. He does a band in Michigan where I used to go to music camp, and we're getting together this summer to share because there's not very many of us, but the music can be an offering. And so this May we're putting on our first Mother Tree Festival, where we're going to go out and find the mother trees and then feed them the mother tree food and make these little mycelial mounds and then play music for them. And the intention here is to connect the forest like Avatar. And sure, we don't have tails in that sense, but we have fields that can then integrate with their fields and then really tune in. Because this landscape, like many landscapes, they are impaired from whether it was mining or water diversion or overgrazing or clear-cut logging or whatever. And nature is like a team, and I advise everyone to be on nature's team because nature is going to win, and it is winning. Nature always wins. And so if we're with it, and now I'm not just talking about nature with the trees and the animals and things, but I'm talking about our true nature. And how do we access that? And so we can use nature as a mirror. So when we burn, did we hit it? Did we actually bring about something that was, in a sense, supportive? Was it good? Was it in that sense, And we do look, oh wow, no, we didn't. We burned down the forest. That wasn't good. And then we use adaptive management to say, oh wow, what can we do differently next time? Because imagine doing this with your backyard. And the main point is to start relating. Now you do it and relate with maybe your park or your woods or your national forest or your state or keeps getting bigger and bigger. And one of the best things is that nature will acknowledge you. And then you can acknowledge the nature within you. And I think that helps. And then there are several traditions that can help as well if people are wanting that. But they can also just do it directly where they are today. Just by saying hello, say hello to nature. Say hello specifically. And we've had we did a wildflower concert a few years ago, and we're at the last song, and all of these ravens came and sat and started enjoying the concert. The aspen tree was singing, and the potentia yellow flowering shrub was singing, and then Seraphine, she was singing. She's a fairy princess, and then the ravens came, and then the wind came and played the trees as an instrument, and then what I call the thunder dragon came. People couldn't believe it. It was like a mix between Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. No, they'll never forget it because we're accessing nature. And if you can really integrate with yourself, you're accessing you too. It's not just the phenomenon, but you're accessing your mind. And I equate the mind, body, speech, and mind, body, spirit, mind, however we want to say it, with our field. I know the field, the electromagnetic field there's a relationship there.
Exactly. And I think that's what's the importance of all of this is relationship, right? Is
Oh, yes.
relationship
Yes.
with the elements, with nature, because it is us, right? We're part of
It
it,
is us.
right?
Especially when we recognize that space that we see in the distance is us too.
Mhm. Right, which is a huge shift for us modern humans.
Yeah.
But noble work. I mean, it's and I just love how there's such a feeling of enchantment about it. You know, you said Harry Potter, and there's this kind of feeling of just being in that enchanted space that's sacred
Right.
and connected.
That if you can uh, bring your attention to the space in whatever you're doing, it will start to reveal so many things about you.
Mm.
That's quite a practice to be able to do, and also know that what to do in case that doesn't work. And so as soon as the fire comes up, right, you can see it a little bit here. But why do we gaze into a flame? And I've heard this as a legend, and that as we gaze into the flame here, and people can do it on their own, just be safe because it is a live flame, is that it feeds the pineal directly. And that's the intent of the intuition kit too, is you can put the intuition kit on, then stare, gaze. And some people like to gaze right into it, and then you can take it in both through your two eyes, but also through your third eye, and then you can close your eyes and then imagine the flame still being there, or just see it, and then see what happens to your third eye. And you can also then look at the space within the flame. And for some people, it might be good to just look off a little bit, and then all of a sudden you'll start to see the aura of the flame. And then as you continue and you'd like to close your eyes, can you see the flame? Oh, I can. Look at that. I can see the flame. But wait a minute, I can see the space within the flame within me. That's kind of key. It's kind of a key thing. Find the space within yourself.
I just love this wisdom teaching. It's so rich.
Well, it's really, I think some of these things were secrets, and they're secrets worth sharing. Some of them I think were hidden on purpose. I think some of them were just, oh, yeah, I didn't think it was important. Some people would just feel that. And knowing that now, that's why I wanted to share about Wisdom Fire, that with our consciousness, we can make the ash of the fire really perfect for the place that we're restoring or stewarding. And also when we burn incense, that ash can perfectly feed us.
Mm.
Some people like to burn incense as they meditate. When the incense is done, then they're finished, but we're qualifying it. And that ash is so similar to, in alchemy, the trace elements, or what we call the ormus elements, or the white powders. But again, it's about interaction and coming from the most perfected place within ourselves, which exists no matter what, but now can we really, in a sense, take refuge in that perfection? and allow that to then qualify the ash as it's being created. So that's when I make my alchemies, that is my intention, because I don't know who's going to get it, and I want it to be perfect for them.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's fantastic. I want to invite people, if you have a question, to go ahead and type it in the chat or the Q&A, or if you want to speak with Peter directly, you can just raise your hand. And while we're waiting for questions, can you just tell us where people can find out more about you and the Mother Tree Festival and stuff that's going, how to access what you're doing?
Yeah, windhorsealchemy.com.
Which I put in the chat if
Great. So that's, there it is right there. And then I could, what I'll do on that site is I'll put a link to the Mother Tree Festival. I could also open up the page here so that we could see it. The Mother Tree Festival is designed so that everyone can participate in forest stewarding, and it's based off the work of Suzanne Simard.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, right. I'm learning from all these people. I've never met them, and the work with the beavers is from Emily Fairfax, who showed that when beavers are present in colonies that are established, the fires are limited. I'm a firefighter. This is where I started. When the mother trees are allowed to remain and not logged, they can create and maintain a mycelial network, which then brings a different kind of balance, which is more resistant and resilient to drought and wildfire. And so there's so many little things that we can do that we've missed, whether it's land ignorance or ecological amnesia, or the other way around.
Yes.
I think you know where I'm going, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And here, I'll share this. See the mother tree. I have the poster up, so hopefully people can see it. I think I can share my screen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, here we go. Here we go. Can everyone see that?
I can see that.
And I will put a link on my main site. But we're having a traditional ecological, traditional elder from the Santa Clara Pueblo speak. His name was Jose Lucero. And then someone, Hannah Strong, who basically put Crestone together with all the groups, as well as Tammy Scarlett from Unify and Miranda Clendening to speak. And then Seraphine will be playing. We'll have the Sonic Apothecary. It's quite a, and then my good friend Bill Smith will be teaching Qigong. It's more like a regenesis where we're bringing as much together as we can, and we will be live streaming part of it. So, and that there's no charge for that. I'll put a link on my website, the Windhorse Alchemy. And there's one other website. It's called E3 Ecologic, and that's our nonprofit. Let's see if I can jump back now to stop the share for a moment and then restart it. There's a yes, I'm seeing the questions now. Yes, I did know Carolyn Brown. We did work together with the forest work, especially with Firewise, and she was working on the South Crestone, and we're continuing the forest stewardship over there with beaver dam analogs and hopefully bringing the beaver back there. And our approach, since we've been doing this for so long, is to really find the mother trees, perhaps reduce the heavy amounts of fuels from a fire sense of view, but then feed them so that they becomes more of a healthy balance there. But ours is about the health of the system. And in our forest type, a healthier system is one that doesn't burn as hot. Some forests do need that intense fire, like the lodgepole pines. They do need that. I believe that actually they can adapt to low intensity fire too. People will argue me with that. But again, are we there? Are we participating? Are we bringing our consciousness? This is like the frontier. Can we bring our consciousness to what we're doing? Whether it's taking care of the forest or making music or creating things. It's can we bring it? Because in a sense, everything is an alchemy.
So
Um,
Carolyn was a close friend. We are the founders of Earth Gym with Mike Dodge. Since relationship is the currency of all living systems and relationship is built on caring, would you say our ability to activate our caring currency to bring nature into our inner circle could be able to support the life support of the planet into balance?
oh, definitely. I want to show you our
Exactly. Since the
yeah,
preservation of nature is based on our ability to see ourself in nature. I mean, that's really the core of it, isn't it?
yeah. And what do you see now?
I see a bear with a fire hat.
Okay, bear. Okay, so let me just share this with you. That bear has been remade. I designed that bear. His name is Kundalini Bear, and he was legendarily. He is the brother of Smokey that got lost, and during that fire in New Mexico, and they never found him. But he ended up at a monastery and became. He worked with the fire within and became a master of the elements. And
Love that.
he's been our mascot since 2003. We have shirts, and people always said, "Is that a real fire department?" I said, "Yes, that's real." And we work with the fire within. And it was kind of a joke at first, but it's not a joke anymore.
Mm.
And you guys are getting to hear this talk now is about this. This is about wisdom fire. It's about there are many traditions, at least a number of traditions that work with the inner fire. And so in this logo we have Kundalini Bear, which and this is the wisdom fire symbol. And I don't know if you can see. I'll bring it out here when we come back. But my friend Matt makes these wisdom fire um, pendants, but I'll get them out. But it's those with silver and copper. But this is the newest member of the team, and this one's name is Keystone Beaver because beavers are shown now be integral with the landscape. The landscape over thousands of years evolved with beavers, and if we don't have them, you also probably don't have 50% of the species that you would have if they were present. And so then we have over here monarch butterfly, we have the milkweed, and we have mycelium, we have mushrooms, we have our endangered cutthroat trout, we have a beaver dam being built, we have a flowing water, we have a ponded water, and then here we have a mother tree. And we add to this all the time, and at some point we're going to have maybe a little kid um, applying mother tree food. And then up here is an endangered crane. So um, it's meant to bring together. Oh my gosh, there's so many things that we have. It's not just about fire, and it's important that people know that I'm kind of from a firefighting perspective, and we're coming to that holistic perspective that includes fire, and then what our role is with fire from Dennis Martinez and the Walpole Island people, and numerous others, and then how science is catching up to like, oh yeah, no, that is important. That is important. And what can we do to reclaim, in a sense, or add to the our our inheritance on the land, which is in some places almost gone. Rich diversity is waning, and we have relic species here that it's really important that we keep um, we keep going, even though we're realizing what kind of work this is taking. And this Saturday we're doing a fundraiser dinner, you know, to show the importance to say, this, to restore even 1 acre is a task, but we're talking about hundreds of thousands of acres, and then educate the public agencies at the same time. And when we post something, we want to state the source. And if it's our belief, it's our belief. It's if it's traditional ecological knowledge, when we say if we can where we got it from. If it's a study, it's a study. If it's our experience, and it's our experience. But to just be very, very transparent. You know, we don't even have to go into politics. They'll play a role in this, but it's more about, hey, let's talk. Let's see what nature's doing. Let's be on nature's team as much as we can.
Jackie wants to know, well, so there's a request to try to show the didgeridoo picture again, because that screen share was working. So maybe it's an issue.
Oh, yeah, I'm not. I can share it again.
Do you see that, or is it just?
Oh, yeah, here, I know how to do it. Yeah, let me do it this way. Okay, did it work? Oh, here we go. Here we go. Did it work?
I'm seeing the bear.
Okay, you saw the bear. Let me do something real quick. One moment. So be very quickly. I'm going to take a screenshot of that, and then I'll pull it up, and then we can share it on a screen share because it's not coming through Zoom for some reason.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah, it just shows up as your name.
Okay, here we go. I think it'll come right up. Here we go.
There it is. Okay. All right. Let us know if you can see that.
It's kind of small, but you can see the form. And I saw someone's question about the Forest Service, and just real briefly the history. Indigenous people, First Nations people, did use fire. And around 1835, they made it illegal to keep doing the stewardship fires, and the penalty was they would be shot. And in 1910, around that time, I think there was such a huge fire from eastern Washington to Montana, maybe the Dakotas, that the Forest Service came into being and said, okay, any fire that gets going, we have to put it out by 10 a.m. the next day. And that fire suppression, the little cleanout fires, as well as fires that would have grown into be big ones, were stopped. And that allowed all this fuel accumulation to occur. It stopped certain species from existing or doing well because they need the fire. Right around Yellowstone in 1988, that fire, that really woke up people. And whether they're letting it burn so they can sell off the land, I think that's another issue that could be part of this. When they go out to suppress fires, oftentimes a lot of the fires are they do the indirect method, so they have to burn out mainly for safety reasons. So if you get a fire, let's say 10,000 acres, it might become 20 because they have to do it for a number of things. Sometimes it's warranted and sometimes it's not.
Okay, so I want to just make sure everybody got a good look at that picture, and you can see the sort of bluish here in the middle of the photo between the didgeridoo and the fire. That's what he was referring to early on. Okay.
Is that good?
That's good. Thank you. I don't see any other questions coming up. So,
I see one. Isn't this why the aliens don't meet with us? They communicate directly with the Earth, as we are the only expressions of Earth, like trees and bears.
I didn't quite catch that. Could you please repeat it?
My phone's paying attention, though. If you are breathing, you are on nature's team and in nature's inner circle. The only difference is that we, as a modern culture, were not taught how to consciously build a relationship with nature. What would you suggest as the first 3 steps to build a relationship with nature? Number 1, say hello. Number 2, which is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is get to know earth, water, fire, air, and space. And if you only pick one, get to know space, but that can be hard. It's difficult, so get to know fire in a safe way. because it is the light, and it's also a phase change. It's the one element that is a phase change right in front of our eyes, and it is picking up on our. It can be picking up on our field state as it's burning. That's why cooking is such an alchemy. It can be. If people don't know that, they may not even do it, right? You know, like water for chocolate, that whole thing. Um, Great chefs, you know, I think are they're allowing their field and their centeredness to express into the food.
Exactly. Okay, I think if you stop the screen share, we'll get you back.
Oh, actually, I am back. Sorry. I just put that on so that we
There you are.
could.
Yeah, exactly. So
It's
people
the,
could get a
just,
sense.
yeah.
So I think if there are no more questions, I just want to thank you so much for this. This is so much to ponder and to play with, right? I think there's a joyfulness about it that at least that I can feel into, that there's so much promise to really seeing ourselves. Oh, Deborah wants to know what's the name of your book.
The name of the book that's not out yet, I'm sorry, is called Walking the Spirit Line. And I'll have to let Judy know, and you can put that out. It's a ways off.
Okay.
I used to do something called Elements Camp for kids, and the kids from about 6 years old up, and we're still kids too, can participate, and they would be introduced directly to the elements. And I do run um, more elements camps for adults, and one will be an immersion later on this year in August in Crestone. I think there'll be one in England, and then I do my high elevation elements retreat at 12,000 feet above Crestone in September. And I'll put a link on the Windhurst Alchemy site so that people can go there, and I'll put elements. So, or actually, I'll put Wisdom Fire, and that'll take you to information about these other events. And I also do journeys online that, Judy, maybe you and I can be in touch about the journeys to Wisdom Fire and natural intelligence. Maybe you and I can talk about that, and where I did these all through the pandemic around the world, just because that was a time we all needed each other and we couldn't get together. And a lot of it was gazing into the fire. And it comes with the formulations, and I have an Alchemy of the Month club, and that might be one way where people can participate. But I can talk about that and see if that's appropriate. Because what came out of the pandemic is we can still connect on Zoom and then in person now. If like I just went out to California, and it's so wonderful to be in person.
Right, exactly.
And also do it. We can also connect in the space through Zoom.
It's so wonderful. And I can't wait to hear more and to get more involved with this. I just think it's really exciting. So, and I will put out on our newsletter, I'll send out a recap of where you can get in touch with Peter and all of his stuff, and the Mother Tree, information about the Mother Tree Festival, which sounds phenomenal. So, Peter, thank you again. Thank you for being with us this evening. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll be together again.
Thank you, Judy, for the invitation, and for everyone who was on the call, and for all the questions. I'm happy to share this and learn as we keep evolving together.
Exactly, as we evolve together. I love it. All right. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.